What if I told you there's a business model that has pretty much rewritten the entire rulebook for the tech industry? I'm talking about some of the biggest success stories of the last decade. Today, we're diving deep into the world of software as a service, or as you probably know it, SaaS. We're going to break down how it works, why it's so incredibly powerful, and what it really takes to build a successful SaaS machine. And when I say it rewrote the rules, I mean it was a seismic shift. Just to give you a sense of the scale here, by 2019, the SaaS industry was already a massive $67 billion industry, and it had nearly doubled in size in just 4 years. This wasn't just growth, this was a gold rush. And it created a completely new playbook for how to build a tech empire. The stakes have never been higher. As Salesforce's CFO Mark Hawkins put it, this is the challenge of our time. If you can nail the transition to SaaS, you're setting yourself up to dominate. But if you fumble it, you risk getting left in the dust. It's a super high-stakes game, and honestly, a lot of companies are still trying to figure out the rules. So what's the big deal with SaaS anyway? It's not just about, hosting software on a server somewhere in the cloud. It is a complete paradigm shift. A total top-to-bottom reinvention of how software is built, how it's sold, and how we use it. Okay, think of it this way. Old-school software was a one-time thing. You bought it, it was a big upfront investment. SaaS, on the other hand, is a subscription, a recurring payment. Old-school software lived on your own servers in your building. SaaS lives in the cloud, and it's constantly being updated, always accessible. And here's the real kicker. Traditional business metrics, they just don't work for SaaS. You're not selling a product anymore, you're selling an ongoing service, a relationship. And that requires a whole new way of thinking about your business, a new dashboard with a new set of dials and gauges to make sure you're actually on the right track. All right, let's dive into the first stage of the SaaS journey, the launch phase. And seriously, think of it like a rocket launch. You are burning a ton of fuel, spending heavily just to escape the atmosphere and get into orbit. The goal is simple. Get as many users on board as fast as you possibly can, even if it means you're losing money in the short term. First step on our new dashboard is something called Customer Acquisition Cost, or CAC. Basically, it's just how much you're spending in sales and marketing to get each new customer in the door. It is the price you pay for growth, and it's a number you absolutely have to know. But spending money to get customers is only half the battle, right? You also have to know how much those customers are worth to you in the long run. And that's where customer lifetime value, or CLTV, comes in. It's the total profit you expect to make from a customer over their entire subscription. Think of it as the total value of that whole relationship. Now here's where things get really interesting. The key to a healthy SaaS business is the relationship between these two numbers. The golden rule is that your CLTV should be at least 3 times your CAC. So if you're spending $100 to acquire a new customer, you need to be making at least $300 back from them over their lifetime. That is the magic number for a sustainable business. And this slide shows you exactly why that 3-to-1 ratio is so critical. It's what they call the SaaS cash flow crunch. Just look at this graph. You see that huge dip at the beginning? That's the company shelling out the cash for CAC. And all of these subsequent months are just the slow, painful climb back to break even. If your CLTV isn't high enough, you will run out of cash long before you ever see a single dime of profit. This is where SaaS gets a little weird. A bit counterintuitive. As NetSuite's former CFO Ron Gill points out, the faster you grow, the worse your cash flow can get in the short term. It's actually a sign you're doing something right, but man, it can be a terrifying ride if you're not prepared for it. So after the initial chaos of the launch, it's time to shift gears. This is the scale phase. You're no longer just trying to survive, you're trying to thrive. The goal now is to build a well-oiled machine, an efficiency engine that can grow and expand sustainably without, falling apart. Okay, so you've got customers coming in, but your bank account is hurting from that cash flow crunch we just talked about. What's the next move? Well, it's time to stop focusing only on getting new customers and start focusing on keeping the ones you already have. And that brings us to the number one enemy of any SaaS business, churn. Simply put, it's the percentage of your customers who cancel their subscriptions each month or each year. Churn is an absolute silent killer for subscription companies. The leaky bucket analogy is just perfect here. You can pour all the new customers you want into the top, but if your existing ones are all leaking out the bottom through churn, you're never going to fill it up. You're just running in place. High churn is a recipe for disaster, and it's something you have to get under control to build a real sustainable business. During the scale phase, investors have this really handy rule of thumb they use to see how healthy a company is. It's called the Rule of 40, and it's actually pretty simple. Your annual growth rate plus your profit margin should add up to 40% or more. So, for example, if you're growing at 60% a year, you can actually afford to have a negative 20% profit margin and still be considered healthy. It's a really smart way of balancing that aggressive growth with long-term financial health. And finally, we reach the sustain phase. The crazy wild growth days are kind of over. Now it's all about building a stable, profitable business that's here for the long haul. At this point, your dashboard gets a serious upgrade. You're digging way deeper into metrics like dollar-based net expansion rate. Now, this one sounds complicated, but it's super powerful. It tells you how much more your existing customers are spending with you over time. If that number is over 100%, it means your current customers are actually growing in value, even if you don't add any new ones. And of course, you're now keeping a very close eye on free cash flow, the ultimate lifeblood of any healthy business. So the game has totally changed. You're no longer just a hunter chasing after new logos. You're a farmer now, nurturing your existing relationships and helping them grow. Success is all about upsells, cross-sells, and keeping your customers so happy that they literally can't imagine their life without you. So let's land this plane. We've flown through the entire SaaS life cycle, from that crazy launch to stable maturity, and now it's time to put together our ultimate success dashboard. This timeline really sums it all up, right? In the launch phase, it is all about that relationship between CAC and CLTV. Then in the scale phase, you become obsessed with churn and the Rule of 40. And finally, in the sustain phase, you're laser focused on net expansion and free cash flow. The dashboard evolves right along with your company. And, it all really boils down to these three things. 1, profitable growth, making sure that 3-to-1 ratio holds strong. 2, balanced profitability, using that Rule of 40 as your North Star. And 3, sustainability, which really just means keeping that leaky bucket plugged by keeping churn low. Get those 3 pillars right, and you are well on your way. So we've looked at a ton of different metrics today, and it's pretty clear there's no single magic number that tells you everything. Building a successful SaaS business is a balancing act, a constant dance between growth, profitability, and sustainability. So here's my question for you. In a world that is just overflowing with data, what do you think is the one metric that truly defines a healthy business? I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks for joining me.